On paper, Music by John Williams is a documentary you've seen a million times before. A chronological look at one's career by detailing their greatest hits rather than equally showing the creative process that made them such a genius. But like any good documentary, it's the passion everyone in front of and behind the camera has on display for John Williams that not only celebrates his greatest hits, but does provide a lot of personal and professional insight most fans wouldn't have known before. The most we get about his personal life comes from his childhood, learning how he got into playing music from his family, how it's pretty much in their blood at this point, and hearing how many hours he would practice piano every weekend on end in his teens shows he's always had dedication to his craft. In his adulthood, we learned a little bit about a personal tragedy I did not expect, and as in real life was so out of the blue, I would have liked a little more time spent on the aftermath of that tragedy because it involves his wife and children who we don't really learn a ton about other than some of them have followed his career path, one of them he actually met during his career path. But the focus of the movie is on his career, and most of the personal events, including this tragedy, only tend to come up if they actually play a part in it. The most mind-blowing career facts we got were the movies he worked on before he became a composer. I had no idea he had ever worked on some of Henry Mancini's scores, or even played piano for movies like To Kill a Mockingbird, West Side Story. Hearing him work with giants at the time like Elmer Bernstein or Jerry Goldsmith, it definitely checks out. But one thing I had never guessed about someone who's composed as many movies as he has: John Williams does not consider himself a movie buff. According to him, he barely goes to see a movie because he's generally too busy working on something else. And hearing him say that kind of dumbfounded me at first, but in retrospect, it makes you realize how much of his themes and compositions come from him watching the film without music and casually imagining what kind of sounds or emotions come to mind, and how to portray them in such a universal cinematic way. While we don't get as much of his creative process as I would have liked, a lot of behind-the-scenes clips frame to look like home movies, and some of them actually are, made by Spielberg himself. Conducting or performing his pieces are often cut off by interviews when just focusing on them for a few minutes or having them as their own scenes would have had a bigger impact. There are quite a few times where we watch a scene from Last Crusade or Jaws with no music, just the sound and dialogue, and then cut to the final product to feel the impact the music has on the story. Or in a rare case where the original theme doesn't actually match the final product, and for good reason. Binary Sunset initially sounded a lot different, and George Lucas wasn't a big fan of that, so Williams changed it into the song we know and love about it now. As opposed to some composers who clash with the director over artistic integrity, Williams treats his directors like customers and focuses on what they want. He'll obviously make suggestions, like when he played the original Jaws or Close Encounters themes for Spielberg the first time, it wasn't what he originally had in mind, and the concept of temp tracks is actually demonstrated in this film to show the inspiration directors have in their vision. That's unfortunately one of the obstacles composers face all the time. But he's smart enough to know the director's in charge, and if it's his piece that changes the director's mind, it just makes him an even bigger fit for them. And since we're on the topic, it goes without saying Spielberg and Williams' relationship is easily the highlight of the film. Whether they're in the same room or interviewed separately, it is just infectious seeing how the two of them have worked so well together ever since Sugarland Express, and that was Spielberg's first movie in theaters. What impressed me most was how Spielberg actually discovered him by watching movies scored by him in the theater, and collecting the vinyls for them and following his career the same way that we follow composers on the internet today. But I think my favorite part about their relationship in particular was the story of him composing Schindler's List, where originally he said no because he didn't think he was qualified enough to do so, and I won't spoil Spielberg's response, but wow, was that priceless. And it was made even better when Itzhak Perlman initially said, "I'll think about working with you," and the story he had about his wife looking at him dumbfounded was even funnier. But hearing Kate Capshaw describe hearing that music for the very first time was just downright heartbreaking. There aren't any other interviews that have the same emotional weight to them. J.J. Abrams, James Mangold, and especially Kathleen Kennedy feel more like Lucasfilm plugs as opposed to having anything genuine to say about John Williams. And what the fuck was Chris Martin doing in this? He added absolutely jack shit to this. But people like the Newman brothers, Alan Silvestri, Ke Huy Quan having a really charming anecdote between them, and of course George Lucas all provide glowing compliments that all inspire or contribute to his work in some way, shape, or form. Also, huge shout out to Elvis Mitchell, who I actually met in my first TIFF when we were in line at the Can You Ever Forgive Me premiere. He was such a cool guy to talk with, and seeing someone I've actually met in this documentary, that was pretty cool. There's a lot of patting him on the back for what a genius he is when really I would have liked to have listened to the actual creative process of how he watches a movie and where that inspiration comes from, especially knowing he's not really a film buff. But as a tribute to, in my opinion, one of the greatest composers to ever live, whether it be film, television, or stage, something that I was really surprised this documentary actually emphasized when he did the theme for the Olympics or for news networks for no reason other than he just wanted to compose music. It was in his blood. It was the way he expressed himself. This was an above average documentary, and I highly recommend you all check it out if you're willing to give Disney Plus the benefit of a doubt. And with that, guys, thanks as always for watching. If you have seen music by John Williams, let me know in the comments below what you thought of it. Be sure to stay tuned for more reviews, check me out on Patreon and buy me a coffee, and be sure to like and subscribe. Take care.